right, guys. Hey, welcome back to the Elephant in the Room podcast. It's been a minute, but we are so excited to be back. We are really excited about today's guest. We have Martin Willis from, oh no, I'm blanking. What's his called?
Podcast UFO.
Oh, Podcast UFO. I was wanting to say UFO podcast. Oh, you don't need to edit it. We can just keep going. It's entertaining. Anyway, so Martin and I met at the Ozark UFO conference. Well, we didn't meet, but we connected online. And ever since then, I've been following his work. I've been keeping up with some of his videos. He gets a lot of big guests on, and he's been doing this a really long time. So we're super excited to bring him on, pick his brain, and kind of figure out what led him into doing this. I'm always so curious about people's origin stories. So yeah, let's bring Martin on.
Hello.
Welcome
Hi.
to the show.
Yeah, that's funny. A lot of people will say like it's UFO podcast. Well, I'll just tell you a quick story about that. When I know that URLs are really important, domain names, and so as far as searching, and so I looked for UFOpodcast.com. It did not exist, and so at the time, this was back in 2011. So I did. Well, one of podcast UFO works, and it did. And I said, well, it's kind of a weird name for a show, but people will find a podcast on UFOs if they're searching.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that all happened.
I absolutely love that. Sorry for biffing it there.
Oh, that's all right. Oh, I get to tell my story that way.
There you go. So yeah, we'd love to hear a little bit about why you started your show and how you got into it and kind of just the journey that it's been for you.
Sure. Well, I started my first podcast on antiques and art in 2009, and it was very, very difficult to put together at that time. It took weeks of people trying to help me, with the RSS feed for Apple and all that stuff. It was really, now you can just go on YouTube and see a tutorial and be in 5 minutes. But I mean, it took a long time to figure it out in the beginning. And I had web people involved. It cost money too, hundreds and hundreds of dollars to try to figure out how to do this. And so anyway, I started that back then, and I enjoyed the whole thing of interviewing people and finding out, like you said, their origin stories. Everyone has one, no matter what, even if they're a collector of antiques and art or whatever, everyone has a great story of their beginnings. So I really enjoyed that part of it. And then I did I decided to go into comedy because I like comedy. I did a little bit of, stand-up myself. So I started interviewing comics. No one really big, but a couple of people that were, on TV and, that people would know their names of. And so that kind of faded out. And then I was on one of the comedians' shows, and he did some type of work with keywords. And he's saying the keyword, he asked me what was the weirdest thing that ever happened to me. And I said, well, I was sitting in a hot tub in Carmel Valley and a disc went right over my head and I didn't know what to, and so he said, that keyword is hot. So I said, oh, UFOs? And he said, yeah, it's a hot word, and so I said, well, I'm actually thinking UFOs might be more interesting than antiques and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I started my first show and I reached out. I started looking more into the topic. I can tell you about my sighting, but that's kind of how I started the podcast. But I started writing to everyone I could find, Stanton Friedman, you name it, and say, hey, I want to start a podcast. Would you be my first guest? And finally, this guy named Stephen Bassett answered, and he said, sure. So he was on number one, and now that's 608, episodes later, I'm still at it, and I know less maybe than what I knew in the beginning. I don't know.
Yes.
But
that is how it works. So it really kind of was spurred on for your passion for interviewing as opposed to just your passion for UFOs. You have a passion for talking to people, hearing their stories, drawing out information, and it kind of came from that.
It did, but also I have a real strong curiosity of what the heck this could be that people are seeing, and so I would say that I have a passion for that, and I find people's stories very interesting. I find their theories very interesting. And, I love to, running into someone that had an encounter, like when you're out and about and people ask you, what do you do? What are your interests and things like that? And you feel like it's appropriate, then you tell them that. Now, I will say that, I was a professional auctioneer, appraiser, and all that. And I was working for a big company and doing really well. And I was let go of that company. I've never been let go of anywhere for anything. And I was really shocked. And I had someone from that company call me, like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 weeks later, and said, you really should watch what you do in your private life. And so I think it had to do with the show. It can't be anything else than the show that, so I don't have skeletons in the closet. So anyway, that's what I think it had to do with that. And it was a really good job, but and I'm a survivor and I've worked for myself for years. So I just took that in stride, but still, 2017 came along when that article came out in the New York Times. And I just think it's a whole different world than what we had prior to that. And when I was let go, that was in 2014. So, and
wow.
I think it had to do with the stigma.
You've really seen a before and an after then, 2017, of just the changed landscape.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it actually happened before that, but there was a live stream, people that were really into this topic at that time. It was in October. It was a live stream. Tom DeLonge put it on, and you had to pay to get into the live stream. And I watched the whole thing, and it was all the information basically that New York Times article came out with. But in the UFO community, we're all going, wow, that's really something. And then the New York Times came out, and that just, changed everything. That was a front page story. And it doesn't get, better than that. I think it was their most downloaded online article, I do believe, or if not, it was like second most. So, it really got worldwide attention. And, and some people never even saw it, or some people, you have to kind of remind them of it.
That's amazing.
I can't remember seeing it in 2017 myself. Do you remember it, Ariel? Were you interested in the topic at this time? You were. So yeah, I have no conscious recollection of the article in 2017 because my interest wasn't peaked yet. So that's really interesting. But obviously shortly after, therefore, it definitely was peaked. Yeah. Martin, what would you say was, gosh, you've seen so many things in this environment. I everything from individual people that you've interviewed and their stories to just the whole landscape of UFOology and, like you said, how it's changed. What would you say is the most evident change since 2017?
I think it's the scientific community. I always had said before that, I realized why science wasn't involved, but I thought it was kind of closed-minded. But I would say, along the lines where, anything that is funded usually has to have an endpoint. So they, and with these, it's such a fleeting situation that, it's probably not easily solved. So I think, funding is, one of the major reasons that people didn't get into it that had a science background, but also the stigma of it. So the stigma softened, and then you get all these people that come forward, some really good science people that are taking it serious. I mean, look at Avi Loeb. Would Avi Loeb from, Harvard ever come out with a Oumuamua thing if it wasn't for the article in the New York Times? I don't think so. I may be wrong. But,
so it's like a foundational piece of credibility that kind of built the UFOology, the latest era, I guess, of it.
Yeah, it kind of made it easy to talk about more. I mean, I'm still a professional appraiser, and when I go out and if I'm in somewhere and someone says something that kind of can spur off of something like, for instance, I was at a mathematician's house and she had these beautiful art glass collection of really nice sculptures and things like that. And she said, math was her thing. She was a professor and she also worked for, the government and certain agencies. She didn't really tell me what. And so I was saying, wow, this is a very interesting sculpture. And she said, yeah, I think the aliens, something like that. She's made some type of joke. And so I go, oh, are you into that type of thing? And she goes, oh my God, just last week we were watching the congressional hearing. We watched that and her husband was a mathematician too. And so I said, well, I was there.
Nope.
And luckily got in the room. Unlike you, Krys, I felt so bad because we saw you, we waved by to you as we were going in the room. But all those people cut in line in front of us, and
I know
the 30 seats were gone quickly.
It was crazy. We had, I don't know what time you got there, because Randall had went, because I basically was roomies with Randall, and he had went overnight and called me like at 4 a.m. and said that the line was starting to form. So I got up and Ubered over there, and lo and behold, I think Martin and somebody else was with you. I think you were
Donna,
right in front of me.
Yeah. Yes. And it was 5:40 a.m. when I actually got in line.
So I was right shortly after, and we stood there all day long. And then Martin, the last one to get in the room, and then they cut me off.
Chris Lito, we were together, and it's only because 2 people got scared because I called them out. I said that whole group of 4 people there cut right in front of us, and 2 of them got scared and took off, and so those are the 2 last seats that were in that place. So
it was such a tragedy. I mean, but honestly, I tell everybody, I really enjoyed being in the Overflow Room because the energy was still there. I mean, and we got to laugh and react probably in ways that you didn't get to react in the room. And when I say laugh, when Timberjet says something like,
dadgummit.
Dadgummit or whatever, and we're loving it, and so we really got to feel the energy and react in the room in a different way. So it was still worth it, definitely.
I'm trying to remember the one that was right behind us that didn't get in. She had blonde hair, and she was the one that drove out from somewhere. Myrtle Beach. I think she was from Myrtle Beach. But I mean, it was like looking at you and her and like saying, oh my God, you can't get in. But she also said that she had a really good time in that Overflow Room. Now, I don't even know how many people were able to get in there, but there were 1,000 people in line,
It was packed. It was a full room. I mean, totally packed. The energy of that day, being in line and like all these lines forming around us, and it was just incredible. And everybody, just watching all the officials walk around like, what the hell hearing is this? Because we've never seen people lining up our halls like this.
Well, I got to say, in all the time that I had been doing this, I got to say that was, if not the highlight, one of the very top highlights of doing this is being in line and talking to like-minded people. And then all these people recognized me from the show. It was really fun to walk around and talk to a bunch of people. And I don't know if you saw the priest, but I interviewed him. That was fascinating. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I did see him. I would love.
What did he have to say? Yeah.
Well, he made sure. He says, I don't speak for the Catholic Church. These are my own opinions. So he just had his own opinion that he thinks they really are. It's really possible that we're being visited by extraterrestrial and all that. So, yeah, I was really glad he said. And then it's really funny. Lou Elizondo's in the background. I didn't even see it. I didn't get to see him that day. But he's standing in the cafe in the background, and people that watched the video of that interview said, "Hey, that's Lou." And so I reached out. I sent a screenshot to him. Aha, you were there.
Yeah, I had seen other people take pictures with him later on too, and we never saw him. So
yeah.
Have you ever had Lou on your podcast?
Yes, I had him on. I think 2 or 3 times, but I will tell you the very first time I had him on was near the beginning of when he came out. And I had a setup in my studio set up in just like I do now. And I went there and every single thing was wrong. I couldn't hear him. He couldn't hear me. And so I recorded, and then I got some questions to him. He was like just barely hearing my questions. And then the weirdest thing is, like, I checked out my studio again right after that, like an hour later, and everything was working perfectly.
Oh my goodness.
It's the strangest
thing. Classic.
Yeah. Men in Black. I was looking for them, you know?
Yeah.
Yes.
But no, I just couldn't understand why that happened. It just happened like that.
And only for that time.
Only for that time. Never happened before or after. Just that one time. So, but the second time he was on, I think he might have only been on 2 times. So the second time he was on, it was fine. No problems.
Oh,
but,
what would you say? I mean, like, you've interviewed, well, I don't know, over 600 people, but you've had 600 episodes. You've interviewed several hundred people.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that sticks out as, like, maybe the most peculiar story, or anything that you really sticks out for you?
Or even just very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, I mean, the one thing that I love about doing the show, and I'm sure you do also, is just the different thoughts that people have on what they might be seeing. But, you know, one of the things that stands out to me is just someone that had called me, and not called me, emailed me. And I said, you know, if you had an interesting encounter, and this guy's encounter was just incredible. So it's those type of stories that are impactful to me. And that one in particular, the guy's name was Albert Wayne, and he doesn't do any podcasts or anything. He's not out there, but his story is just so profound. Back in the 1970s, such a credible witness. And basically the thing was over him and his girlfriend, and all these cars have pulled over to the side of the road on I-95 going down toward New York. And this thing was just over a field, and he could see, like, windows and lights, and they saw it coming in and stopping over a field. And then the trees beside the field were waving back and forth like it was a hurricane. And then he says, and almost like it wasn't there, all of a sudden it was above him. And he saw, and he had a really hard time saying this, he said, I saw hominids and through the amber windows looking down at me. And he says, and I hate saying this, but all of a sudden in my head said, don't worry, we're not going to hurt you. We're just curious. And then he says, and almost like it wasn't there, it was back over again where it was, you know, just, it was an instant, like it was, there was no time in between the two. And so then it shot off, and then all the cars in a row started to move, and he looked over to his girlfriend and he said, let's get an ice cream, like not even discussing what happened. And every single car pulled off of the first exit, and every single car pulled into the Howard Johnsons, and people were walking like zombies into the Howard Johnsons. And he got himself a banana split and was talking to someone else. But every car, I mean, talk about a weird situation. Those are the type of things that are just incredible to me.
Wow.
And do you see patterns in stories like that? I'm sure you've seen so many patterns across the stories.
Yeah, you know, well, the one thing when I had my UFO sighting, and I can talk about that, it's nothing spectacular like some of the ones I've heard, but the one thing that the patterns that you hear a lot are, and which was the most baffling to me, was no sound, no sound. And some of the, we talk about the strange patterns, no sonic boom and the things are moving fast, no splash in the water, no situations that just absolutely make no sense. I guess that's the pattern. And also I like to hear encounters where something really weird, something really weird, because, it doesn't seem like it could be something that was added. You know what I mean? It's just too weird.
Yeah, like you mean the story, like it's not
like something in the story,
something people would make up.
Yeah,
like when an alien made a guy a pancake. Isn't that
yeah, that one I don't know. They did some research on that one in particular. They found it.
But every
wasn't
time I
in
think of
Jemima's-
like weird
Yeah.
encounter, that one is just the first that pops. You've never heard this one, Chris?
Oh,
I have not. I
Yeah.
have not.
yeah.
An alien made somebody a pancake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He went on board the craft and he got a pancake or something.
Interesting. Okay.
I
But there are a
mean,
lot of cases where someone will say, "Yeah, we didn't even talk about it." I've had so many people say that
I've
that
heard
type
that
of thing,
before.
or or they see something entirely different, which is another really bizarre thing. So
Yeah.
those are kind of the patterns. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, and there's so many things that I could tell you that I have thought was really, really amazing. But I mean, they're
What conclusion does it bring you to so far in your, like you said earlier, you probably know less than you since
Yeah.
you started, and that's the way this field works, I think. But
Mhm.
what conclusions have you come to? Do you have a favorite theory on what aliens are, or whether they're aliens, or where they came from?
Yeah, I really, I mean, there's a great saying, and I do believe this the more I've looked into this, and it's by Isaac Newton. It's what we know is a drop and what we don't know is an ocean. And I feel like we know, and I've said this on my show recently more often, I really feel as though we know very, very little about what is going on around us. And I mean that in the skies, I mean everywhere. I mean, for so many reasons, I just think we know so little. But some of the theories I think are possible or extraterrestrial. I would rate that as probably the higher ranking in my mind. Interdimensional, though, explains a lot of things.
Me too.
When the people say blinking in and out, for instance, when I interviewed someone from the Ariel School incident back in 1994, they were saying that the being was heading toward the pool, like it was 300 meters away, and it was like running, but it was skipping out and then back in front of itself, like he was trying to explain it. And those type of situations, when people say that they see something, then all of a sudden it's gone, and then it showed up over here or whatever, it does seem like there's a possibility of that. But I do like, I would be stealing this from like Jacques Vallée, but I do agree with it. And that is, we may not even understand. It may be impossible for us to understand what it is exactly.
Right.
So,
that's kind of how I tend to think about it at this point still as well. And, this isn't the first time I've said this. I talk about this example a lot as, before people knew what germs were, they had no context for understanding how they were getting sick, what was making them sick, how to get better. They had no framework for that because they literally didn't know what a germ was. And so I kind of wonder if that's how it is with us. Like, what piece of the puzzle are we completely missing that makes it impossible for us to fully grasp?
Right. Yeah. No, it's a very good point. Yeah.
I agree. Until we had telescopes, we couldn't see some planets. Until we had microscopes, we couldn't see, the bacteria that's living within us and that we need to survive. And, there's benevolent bacteria and malevolent bacteria,
That's
and
right.
I just think, I think the world is just much more enchanting than we imagine. And we just don't have the sensory capabilities yet to
That's right.
to kind of interact with it. That's kind of one of my theories anyway. I think things exist as they exist and we just didn't realize it.
And I think with the new technology that the armed services is always coming up with, maybe we'll see more and more as things, come along of a new technology, and like a lot of the FLIR videos, those are, the way they're sensed, the way those have shown us some interesting things.
Have you talked to I think his name is Marcial. I feel bad. I've had him on the show, and he's the one that has the DHS videos from the Department of Homeland Security that he released. But some of the video footage that they're capturing and that we have access to, I think is important. And to me, it's just evidence that they've been able to see and capture things before that they're probably not admitting to us.
Yeah, I can go right in there with the government conspiracies that of the cover-ups. I mean, because as long back as you hear about these things, that they have been confiscated and, to be taken away to where, who knows. And and then if Kirkpatrick on the AARO had, the search capabilities, I'm sure that they could be found unless somehow they were privatized in some type of way. There'd be the without any overreach. But there are many, many cases of things being confiscated that, were films. So I think they do know a lot more than. But here's my theory on it. I think they know a lot more than we know, but I don't think they know everything. That's my theory.
Right. I agree.
I think that stops the quote disclosure from coming out, because it'd be a lot of explaining to do, first of all. And secondly, if they don't have the full picture, then how can they protect us from whatever it is? So I think these are just my own thoughts. I can't say whether they're right or not, but
I think a lot of people think that. I mean, I think that's definitely, in my opinion, one of the reasons. I think there's probably some other motivations behind why they keep it secret as well, just financially and politically. But certainly they have a lot of explaining to do, because I've seen things on a consistent basis in places that they shouldn't be, near bases and stuff. And like, if these things are able to do that, or to observe, or to surveil, or whatever, without us admitting it, then that's a problem, in my opinion. So
yeah. Now, I would like to tell you a story that I was told back in the 1990s before I was really even looking into the topic, if you want to hear it.
Yeah,
because I think it's really interesting. Okay, so I had an insurance broker come to my house for life insurance, and I bought a policy. And so we were chatting afterwards. He was older than me, and he said that he was in Vietnam, and I said, "Oh, wow, well, that must have been really something." And he said, actually it was. He said, I had a special clearance, and I was involved in something really interesting. So I said, "Oh, really? And what was that?" And he says, I was in a segment of the Air Force that was researching what the UFOs were that were showing up during napalming and bombing. And he says, so we investigated, that was my job, to investigate, try to figure out what they were. So I go, really? And so I said, so they're really here, and all that. And he said, oh, yeah. And then he said, and they're also very interested in our nukes. And he started talking about that. So this is like in 1996 or something like that. He was on his way out the door. And I said, oh, by the way, what does the government think that they are? And he just looked at me and he said, we're a petri dish. And then he went out the door. And it was like, whoa, we're being observed. No, I don't know if that's true. And I tried to find this guy. I know his name. I know he's an insurance broker. I can't find an obituary. I can't find anything. And I finally found someone with the same name and insurance out in the Midwest. And I thought maybe he moved out there. And they said, no, it wasn't me. So I'd love to be able to reach out to this guy if he's still kicking,
Wow, and, that's crazy.
A petri dish.
Tom Bowden, insurance broker. I'll put it out there if someone happens to hear this.
There you go.
Insurance broker Tom Bowden, and yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And that was in Vietnam. That was back in the 70s. Wow.
Yep, 60s, late 60s, early 70s. It stopped 73, I believe. Yeah. But anyway, that's fascinating.
That, I mean, yeah, that's not even surprising for us to hear because, in the UFO community, it's just common knowledge that they're interested in our nukes. But to have heard that so long ago from, someone not even quote unquote in the community just gives it more credibility.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. What would you say? For me, coming into the community, it was just a couple years ago. So one of the things that was the most like revealing or shocking to me was just like all the different areas that are related to UFOs that you don't realize, maybe Bigfoot or, cryptids, all these other areas that when you're like definitely not on the inside, you just think UFOs are a craft and they fly and they may have aliens. And then you come into the community and you're like, whoa, what has been the most like strange thing you think that people connect with this topic?
Oh, well, there's when I've looked into this more, there was, like an encounter with this elderly woman was watching out her backyard and she saw this orange orb, was like not really very big, but it kind of just floated in her backyard. And then she said a Bigfoot came out of it.
What?
So that those are the things that, now whether this was, maybe she was doing magic mushrooms. I don't know. But, but still, you hear, there's a couple of instances you hear where there's a connection like that.
Yes.
Now I will tell you, and then the ghost connection as well. I lost a friend recently. Paul Eno was in looking into paranormal and this type of, and UFOs for a long, long time. Many years. And he, one of the last conversations I had with him, he said that he believes that everything is the same thing. And I said, like ghosts and Bigfoot and UFOs? Yes. He said it's all related, interdimensional. So that's what he was thinking. And maybe, I had what I consider a poltergeist situation that I thought in my life at the time when it happened that I would never, ever tell anyone about it. And I talk about it because I don't really care. It happened and it's unexplainable, but that would possibly make a sense that if it was interdimensional, I think, I don't know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. And, we had someone on our podcast who she didn't tell her whole story, but she started the Yale UFO Society. It's like one of the first UFO societies at a school. And she actually, her encounter was in a public park in, I think, Washington State. And her and a girlfriend or her friend was there and they saw a UFO. And then they turned and there was a corporeal being, like she couldn't explain what it was like, but it was some sort of being. So yeah, it was UFO and then the being, and then they actually walked past it because they had to get to their car and they were freaking out, and then it kind of disappeared.
Now, was she at a parking garage by chance? Oh no, I'm thinking of Washington D.C. No,
it was in some sort of park. It was at a park in Washington State. Yeah. So
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So and this is and she, I believe, has also had some like Men in Black type encounters since then. So she saw something somebody didn't want her to see. So yeah.
Really, yeah, the whole Men in Black thing is really, I just had someone talk to me about that last week and it blew my mind because his credibility is really high on the whole situation. And he didn't use the term Men in Black, but he said he was working 2 jobs and living with his grandmother at the time. This was 2 years after his encounter in the military. And he was at work and he had left his car in the driveway. He rode with someone to work and his grandmother answered the door. She was no dummy. She had her PhD and JD. She was a law degree. And so she gets a knock on the door, opens the door, and there's a man standing there with a bald head in a suit and very, very pasty, pale skin and sunglasses And then he's saying he wanted to speak with Jonathan, and she looked out to the car, and there was a very similar looking person behind the wheel. It was an old Marquis, Grand Marquis car. And she never said Men in Black. She just described everything to him. She
Right.
had no idea. And
Yeah.
because she had, she had her smarts about her, she kept saying, I need to see an ID. And the person wouldn't produce an ID. And he said he worked for the government and wouldn't produce an ID. And so she kept saying, I need to see an ID. And he kept repeating over and over again, I need to speak with Jonathan Wigan. I need to speak with Jonathan Wigan. And monotone. And she finally said, get the heck out of here.
Oh, robotic.
Yeah. And so then a couple of weeks later, his car was plowed into in the driveway because it was sticking out too far, and someone plowed into it. And when they left their front bumper, and on the front bumper had a license plate, and it was a federal plate.
Oh boy.
No way.
Yeah. It's a crazy story.
See, I've heard stories from people as well who've had abduction encounters, and since then they've had threats. They'll have military helicopters low over their home, people showing up in looking like thug-like, and just asking questions and kind of like veiled threats. So yeah, really, just things you would not believe actually happen. You hear these actual stories from people. Yeah. I'm not a big sci-fi person. Ariel knows that about me. I wasn't into sci-fi before this, so I missed a lot of like the cultural references. So Men in Black, I need to watch that. So I watched it. But you hear those stories. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, it had to start somewhere. And, the stories go back quite a ways. And, from people that I've talked to, it's occasional, I'd say. And I probably have interviewed more than 600 people, because a lot of times I'd have, several people on my show at the same time. So,
oh yeah.
But anyway, of all the people that I've interviewed, I would say only a handful of times I've heard about that type of situation afterwards. And it's always fascinating, and to begin with, because they always seem to be very weird people, and what they are, who they are. And always the old car, and it's a strange.
Weird.
Well, I've thought, and I may be wrong on this, but it seems like the AARO is kind of like window dressing, that has, over time, things have repeated similar to this, but they're admitting things that they hadn't admitted previously. But I don't know if it's going to get us any further. I do know that when Kirkpatrick says that he has not interviewed any firsthand witnesses, that is BS, because I know people personally who have, sat for one, Mario Woods. He tells me very clearly 4 hours and 19 minutes. That's how long his, interview was with them. And he's definitely a firsthand witness, and it's just like, nope, nothing to see here. And so it is kind of frustrating. There are, the UFO world doesn't do itself any favors, though, when they threaten Kirkpatrick and do things like that. I mean, you think that it's totally wrong.
Of course. Yeah, no.
What totally. I want to know is I'm kind of I have a wild imagination, and I've watched a lot of crime shows. And the first thing that pops into my head is, really, like, what if Kirkpatrick or anyone else who is obfuscating the truth is truly like being blackmailed or bribed or, something like that? What threatened? What if they're threatening, oh, your children are not going to get into college if you tell the truth? What if there's legitimate threats and he has a reason for what he's doing?
Yeah, or he's a puppet master. There is a puppet master. Controlling what the narrative is going to be. These are possibilities. Because again, we're seeing some BS. Maybe there is some truth to that last report, but when I heard Kirkpatrick in a live stream that I made sure that I was in to watch him. This was, I think, right after he was resigning or announced he was going to resign.
Right.
And there was a journalist in the front row that raised her hand, and she said, well, what about the Nimitz, the Tic Tac UFO situation? What about, are you going to be investigating that? And he sort of chuckled and he said, well, you people out there, you all have all the information I have. Everything's on YouTube, and like that. And that's BS right there, because, someone landed on the USS Princeton. I'm sorry, the Nimitz actually that night, and they on a helicopter, and they went and they got the data bricks, and they left with the data bricks from the Hawkeye and with all the radar info. Someone has that information. And if he didn't know that, that would be a shocker right there. Of course he knows that situation. So I think there's a lot of deflecting.
One of the things I find probably the most fascinating things about this topic is how if there are crash retrieval projects going on, how do you think they get there so fast? Like, how is it that they are able to identify these things? Or is it that they're shooting them down, and so that's why they're there and they're able to like confiscate them faster? I don't know. I just think of like the Brazil case, and how was it that they were there so fast to get these retrieve it and confiscate it? They must have some abilities.
I absolutely think the same thing all the time. And someone has reached out to me when I posed that question myself on one of my podcasts, is they think that they're monitoring some type of frequency that these things
put off,
emit, or something. But the shoot down, that's another thing that, there are people that believe that these things are being shot down. And, I had Mike Herrera on that basically was saying that he thinks that they shoot them down. And the guest that I had has only been interviewed twice since 1997. He thinks that when he saw this craft that he came upon, that it looked like it had I forget what it was called, some type of missile, cruise missile, hit it. That's what he thought when he looked at the wreckage, because he saw planes that had very similar wreckage that was hit by the same type of missile. So when he was doing his research on this, but so in both situations, there were people that showed up in black camouflage immediately and took over the situation, aggressively. So, and they were American accents and black camo with no insignia and American automatic weapons with them in both cases. And and they show up right after. And you're talking about Brazil, same thing. And it seems to be like the U.S. is involved somehow. And then it's all hush hush. And so, it's really a fascinating thing how there always seems to be a quick retrieval or, someone showing up.
It's just so weird.
Over and over.
Yeah. I feel like people aren't talking enough about that. People are not questioning that enough, because that is strange and you have to explain it somehow.
Yeah, that's one thing that sticks out for me. Like, how do they show up? How do they know?
Yeah.
There's something.
I remember, You're talking about Brazil. You're talking about the Varginha incident when Americans showed up right away. That one in particular.
I know, probably. I don't know about that one. I'm thinking about the one with James Fox.
That's what I'm talking about. Varginha. Yeah. I asked James when he was on my show last time about how do you think they show up? And he says, I don't know, but it seems like it happens all the time. And
there's some sort of surveillance. You've got to know somehow when they're crashing, if they're just showing up. I watched your interview, or at least most of it, with Mike Herrera, and that is just like, it gives me the chills. Like, to think that our Marines, our military can be like that fast. Dearmed and totally vulnerable, and like no, with and who's doing this? Like this is our, like that's scary to me. Like that you're doing that to our military, and our military is just like walking away and not being able to say anything about that type of situation happening. Like that's terrifying.
Now I had let's see, a former military person. I'm also on Thursday nights. I'm in a thing called UAP Crossfire, and it's a live show and we definitely have different opinions and get in arguments quite a bit.
I was going to ask you about UAP Crossfire because I saw one of your shows and I watched a little bit of that, and that looked fascinating. And I was like, I wondered if that was a separate show or if that is one separate. That you produced. Okay.
Yeah, a separate show, but it's still, they were saying there's no way that a Marine would actually let someone, even guns pointed at them, that they would just, they would let them do that. Right. But I don't know if that's, you don't if you're not in the situation, how do you know? You know what I mean?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
And maybe old school was, oh yeah, anyone would take them out right away, that type of thing. I don't know. Maybe that was the old school, but if someone's pointing an automatic weapon at my head, I'm going to listen to them.
It's true. It is true. I've been in a situation personally where I always thought if I was ever like attacked or, in a situation, I would fight back. That's not what happened. Yeah. Oh. I did honk the horn, which I subconsciously didn't know I honked the horn, and somebody approached my vehicle. And I thought they had a gun because it was under their shirt and they made it look like a gun. So that fight back did not happen. It was like, oh, what do you want? Let me go. Let me follow you like a dummy, because your instincts kick in. So you wouldn't think that would happen to our military, but when you have a force that's strong enough and intimidating enough to do that, that's what to me is like appalling, that there's something out there doing that to our military in order to hide this secret from us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, if it's any of that's true, what Mike said, they have to hide it because it's terrible, what they supposedly are up to,
right. Body.
And all that stuff. And, if they do have the reverse engineering capability and it's being kept from us, it's baffling on its own. Like, how is it being kept from us? It seems like somewhere along the line, someone would say something, look, hey, I work there. I have the evidence, that,
right.
Snowden or some person like that, it seems like that would
that's
happen.
One argument, because my husband is a total skeptic, and that's one argument that he brings up to me a lot is, if in the history of all of this, is what you're saying is true, Ariel, and all of this has happened, and they are doing crash retrievals, and they are doing reverse engineering on UFO tech, and all of this is really happening, Ariel, then how has no one come forward and given like the hard evidence, proof, photographs, videos, all of that? And I don't know, because you would think, even if it's very, very compartmentalized, that someone, like you said, a Snowden, someone along the line would leak it.
Right. There's a case at Gate C-17 in 2007, I believe, at O'Hare Airport, where the disc was over the runway or the tarmac, I believe. And all these people saw it, and they were basically told not to talk about it. Now I'm wondering why someone hasn't retired. 2007 was a long time ago, and talking about it. Mm-hmm. So it makes me wonder what keeps people talking about it. I understand, your pension's threatened or whatever, that type of thing. But it really, I don't know if your husband was asking me that question, I wouldn't know how to answer him on that, because it's curious to me too why why we don't have the hard evidence. I haven't watched the Ariel School incident. That one turns a lot of people over after they watch that whole thing.
I keep telling Ariel that. I'm like, you really got to watch that. That was what converted my husband.
I mean, it's my namesake, so I gotta, right?
I know. And it's such a great film. But one of the
it's so funny. People like always think that my Twitter handle is like like that my name is, they think my name is Elizabeth and that I'm referencing the Ariel School. And
I gotta tell you, that's what I thought at first.
See?
Yeah, I did.
People think that all the time, and I get that, but I'm like, no, my name is actually Ariel. My middle name is Elizabeth, and because I don't like to put my last name out in the world.
Yeah.
And so, but I do love the Ariel case. I really do.
Yeah, it's so good. But back to the Chicago thing. My son works for the airlines and worked in Chicago. And he's brought up the question before, and literally the people were just like, like it was like a maintenance guy or something. And he asked, oh, hey, I heard today. And the guy was just like, I'm not talking about it. Like, it was like fear. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So I don't understand that either. Like, I don't understand what kind of power and influence whatever has over people to make them afraid to talk about it. I don't think I want to understand it either.
Yeah.
I'll be okay just fine just the way I am. So.
Do you think it maybe has, like, for some people, it has to do with the ontological shock that they just can't integrate what they saw, and so they just want to like pretend it never happened?
I think that's definitely part of it. I mean, I think if they were threatened in any way, that's one thing. And then the second thing is, remember, this happened how long ago? It was definitely the stigma's there. Like, the people aren't going to, people who've had sightings, I think, from the past aren't going to feel like me when I get to come out, when it's all, daisies and flowers and UFOs are like all over Taylor Swift and, they're popular. It's so easy for someone like me to come and say I've had a sighting. But back then, I mean, no freaking way would I have said anything. So,
yeah.
When I had my sighting, I was working at an auction gallery in California, and that was on a weekend, and I went in the next Monday, and I was mentoring a woman there, and teaching her things like in silver, and to learn all these different things. And so I said, okay, I'm going to tell you something, but don't tell anyone. But I was in a hot tub this weekend. This just came right over me, and I can't believe it, and all that. So it wasn't even like 15 minutes later, someone was teasing me, going, "Oh, aliens, huh?" Like that. So the word got around really quickly, and there was the ridicule thing. So that I didn't talk about it.
That's so sad. That is like really. It's to me, it's sad. It's just a different world for me. I'm pretty lucky, I think, and I'm sure there's people who talk behind my back, but for the most part, people are very, whatever. Like, either they'll shut down, like I'll have somebody be like, "Oh, I don't believe that," and they just don't want to talk about it at all, or they'll just start asking questions, and most people are typically curious, I think.
Yeah. And Ariel, if I had advice to talk to your husband, just say, well, there's all this evidence that there are things, but I'm not saying that I know what they are. If you just leave it, that's the simplest way to get into it for someone to to have them maybe take a little bit better of a look at it. Because once you start, I mean, I myself always stay away from people that say they know exactly what it is. They know they're from here and from there and all that. And it's not, they don't even say maybe, they just say they are.
Right.
And I got on UAP Crossfire, we had this guest come on that he was just saying that. And I said, now, wait a minute, how about you're saying you think they are or whatever like that. And everyone ganged up on me. It was a mess.
Oh no.
Because he worked for NASA, so he knows the holy man, but
nobody knows. Nobody knows for sure. People think they know, but nobody knows for sure, and I'm totally on your side. It's my pet peeve when someone is saying it's this, and this. And it's like, no, you can't be sure,
Yeah.
if it was that obvious, and because they're just like, well, it's this and this and this. Well, if it was really that self-evident and the evidence was just all around us, and that was the conclusion, then everyone would be saying that, not just you.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's too much mystery in it. But I don't know. I feel bad for people who are like on the outside of the community. I don't feel bad, but I'm passionate about them trying to have a place to kind of come in and learn and understand, the complexities of the topic, because I think that's one of the things you just don't see on the outside. And then when you come in, you see it's literally a wicked problem. It's one of those massive, giant hyper objects that Dr. Madden talks about, that's kind of taken over. If you think it's its own machine, of UFOology working, where you have all these researchers trying to research, but you have all this obfuscation, and it's just like hard to unpack the whole thing.
Really.
And you would know
Well
more
said.
than anyone, because you've got such a vast view, I think, of like
Mhm.
all the complexities of this topic. I think it's really such a unique and fascinating journey that you've had to go on. When you saw the craft yourself, did it do, besides the stigma, did it do anything internally to you?
No, the only thing it did for me is get me curious, because I knew, and I'll just describe it real quickly. I mean, it was, I actually saw a fireball in the 1980s that was much more dramatic than it was right over my head type of situation.
Oh my gosh.
So that was crazy. This one, it was like something caught my eye. I was in the hot tub. I had the bubbles off. I was just relaxing. I was not drinking at the time. And people always ask. And then something caught my eye, and I just followed the motion. And I look up, and it's a perfectly shaped disc, just like a silver dollar or something, just right over me, with a blue glow around it, and like a soft blue glow around it. And I've heard a few other cases of that. So it was just moving in a straight line, exactly like a straight line, like it was on a track. I mean, it was perfectly straight line, and then it stopped, and then it veered off toward Monterey in that direction. And so if I had a phone next to me with a camera, that we didn't have good phone cameras in 2007 when I had that. But if I had a camera, I wouldn't even thought to have picked it up to take a picture. I was just mesmerized by it and wanted to catch every second of it in the sky. And then when I was getting out of sight, and it never moved faster, it moved the steady speed the whole entire time. And I didn't realize it was anything such as MUFON or any place to report or anything like that. So I jumped out of the hot tub, and I went into the guest house where I was staying, and there was a phone on the wall, and I didn't know how to dial. So I dialed 911, and I said, this isn't an emergency, but I just want to know, has anyone over Monterey seen this object coming over? And she was very, very sarcastic and put me on hold forever. So I finally hung up, But anyway, that was my incident. So the only thing it made me was curious, like, what was that? I saw something that I don't think came from here. I don't think it's anything we would have owned or made, or, there's some people that argue that. And
now it's like, if you have a sighting, it's, oh, that was a drone, or that was Starlink.
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous.
But during your sighting, that wasn't a thing yet.
Right. Yeah. And I've had Mark D'Antonio take a look at it. I had a wild thing that I saw a couple of years ago now. When I was walking up in Maine, I had this thing came over, but anyway, Mark thinks it's a drone, and it probably is a drone. See, that's the thing. Once I have this show, I don't want to just say, hey, look, willy-nilly, I had a UFO sighting. I want to make sure it is what it is,
Right.
So I think that was probably a drone. But I got to tell you this really weird thing, though, that happened to me. I was renting a condo on a golf course, and back in 2015, I think it was, doing my show, and I thought I heard something at my door. I had my studio at that time in like the lower level, which was a walkout basement and a golf course behind. So I didn't think much of it, whatever, and I did my show and I was done. And so the neighbor, a day or two later, she said, "Hey, I was knocking at your door the other night," and I said, "Oh, I thought I heard something." She said, "Yeah." She said, "This huge triangle thing came down right over the golf course and with lights on it, and it was just like gliding, no sound at all, and then it just rose up and took off." And I go, "Are you kidding me?" During my show, this thing was right outside.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, "Would you please come on my show?" She goes, what show? What? I said, "I do a show on UFOs." And she goes, "Oh my God." She goes, "Absolutely not." I couldn't even get her audio. I tried to get her audio. She wouldn't even do it.
She wouldn't talk about it.
No.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a crazy story.
Yeah. I wish
that
I
is.
should have.
Do you remember who you were interviewing during that or during that time slot? Because maybe the aliens were like, kind of like, what is he saying to this guest?
Yeah.
We need to check up on this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'd be able to research that now.
They all made contact together.
Be funny. Yeah.
Wow.
Some abductee. Travis Walton, I guess. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That would be crazy. Yeah. So one thing I really love to ask everyone who comes on the show is, are there any authors or books or researchers that have really made an impact on you and your UFO journey?
Yeah, I think well, I found one really interesting, and I don't know if you call it an impact or what, but one of them was Linda Zimmerman wrote a book on animal experiences and their behaviors. And I think that's really fascinating. There's so many cases, and she has a lot more to talk about since she wrote that book. So, because if you really think about it, they're non-biased, and, they're just living their lives and surviving. And then all of a sudden there's all these reactions that are just crazy. And so it just makes me realize that there's much more going on to this whole thing than what we know or think we know. So, I mean, that's maybe kind of a lame answer, but one, if I think about some of the books I read, I thought that was fascinating, that particular book.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned being impacted by Jacques Vallée and his work. Yeah.
I think he's done a lot of really interesting things. He's a computer scientist, but he's had a really, steady, balanced look at things over the years, and he's been important. We had Stanton Friedman, I thought was important, and he's been gone since, before you started the show. He was a person I had on many times and really enjoyed him. People like him.
When did he pass? I feel like it was right, like somebody in really significant passed right when I started getting into the community, and I remember everybody being very sad about it.
Yeah, I don't have the date now. I do know that I was contacted. Someone wrote me from Reddit. They said it was on Reddit that he was in an airline. He was at an airport. But I can tell you when that is exactly if I.
Because Stanton Friedman passed in 2019.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah.
So not that long ago.
No, he was definitely an icon and will be missed. And we just lost Dr. Bruce Maccabee. He passed away a couple of days ago, and he's someone that was another icon in this, looking at images and things. And I'll never forget what he told me when I interviewed him. He said the images and the videos don't really matter. He says the witness is number one. So, and I think that's true. And someone who's kind of doing the same work as Mark D'Antonio, and he agrees with that too.
Wow, Krys, you would have gotten along with him, huh?
I know. I really would love to I met Mark D'Antonio at one of the Roswell conferences last year, and he told me to send him some videos, and I lost his card, and I need to do that again because I have, several videos I'd love somebody to take a look at. I've been wanting somebody with credibility to look at them for a very long time. So many.
I'll pass your information. I'll pass the information along. Sure.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I feel the same way. I told Ariel, I feel it's important. Like, I don't want to just claim I've had these sightings and not have any credibility to them. But I think what you said is true, because in the end, my videos and, people can blow them off. People can say this or that, but I know what I've experienced, and the effects of that, whatever it was, even if it was our technology, maybe, it was something that had an ontological effect on my life that made me say, okay, there's something bigger out here in the world. And I think that's what, the witnesses can do for the topic. And I think in the end, when we talk about disclosure, it's going to come down to witnesses.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
We'll see how that goes. I watched a 1950s video of this guy being interviewed, and it was really funny. He says, "I just want to know in my lifetime."
That's so depressing.
He's long gone. He probably didn't even make it to 1955. I don't know. This was like in 1952.
So depressing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's why you have to appreciate the journey and revel in the mystery a little bit, because if you do look at it that way, then you are going to get depressed really fast.
Yeah. There was a time when I thought about giving up the podcast. There was a lot of infighting going on, and which does seem to happen in every part of our society. But anyway, there was a time where I thought, well, I don't know. And I even offered, there was a guy looking to start a podcast, and I even offered it. And luckily that didn't happen. And then at one point, I don't think I've ever said this publicly before, but Art Bell was going to hire me as a producer for a show.
Wow.
And so, but he had to make one more call to me. He was supposed to call at 11 in my time. So I waited for his call. It never happened. So at 1:00, I finally went to the lake and went swimming. And that's when he called me and said, screw it. He was going to go with someone else. But here's the thing. One of the things he says, you're going to have to give up your podcast. So I would have had to give up my podcast. And then he had this girl named Heather Wade took over for the job I was supposed to do. And then she took over his seat. So I don't know if that would have ever happened. Who knows? All those things. But things were all working out exactly the way they were supposed to. In my opinion.
Yeah. Things happen for a reason. And please never give up your podcast, because we truly need people who have such a long-term approach and such a seasoned approach to this topic. We need you to bring your wisdom, and you just have so many experiences and interviews to draw from that it would be so tragic to lose your voice in this community. So I hope you keep going strong for a long time.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet of you. Thank you. I do too. I still love it. So
it's so fun, isn't it? It's just like, I feel so even though we just have our tiny little show here, I am like amazed at the guests we've got. We're just so blessed and so lucky. And just to hear people's stories and talk to people like this, I don't know. It's just one of the funnest things I've ever done. And and then to do it with Ariel, it's just amazing.
That's great.
No.
I'm don't give up one. Because we all start somewhere.
Yeah, you got to start small. I know that. Yeah. So, hey, you were our 300th subscriber, by the way. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, we hit 300.
Yeah.
So,
that's good.
Well, do you want to wrap up with our final question for Martin?
Will. So one of the final things we try and remember to ask all our guests, but we tend to forget, is what do you think is the elephant in the room when it comes to UFOology?
Well, I think the elephant in the room is just the fact that we know that there are forces out there that know a lot more, and that it's pretty blatant that they're hiding it. You know, I mean, to me, I think that's maybe not hiding everything, but hiding, some core things that they know. So I think, and I have to say, I'm referencing mostly the U.S. government, because I don't know what other governments do know and whatever, but I do believe we know quite a bit that is not being shared with us. So I guess that would be the answer.
I agree. I think that's
a good one.
Somebody the other day said it seems like, UFOs aren't the story, it's the cover up. And I kind of agree.
Yeah.
Really, because we would have more knowledge about the UFOs if we didn't have the cover up. But so interesting. Thank you so much for joining us. We didn't talk about Ozark at all. Do you guys have anything that you wanted to share there?
I thought it was great. You know what? I had been told early on when I started this podcast that was a really, really good conference to go to. And so I decided to go this year, and I was not disappointed at all. It was a lot of, and it's all, Ariel, you have to agree with me. The connections you make in the hallways is so much, so much more fun than, just watching something. And so all that was really good. And the scenery there was just amazing. I thought it was such a beautiful area right there. And I want to go back again. It was nice enough to visit again. So, and great speakers. And, Nick Pope, I've had a really good interview with him there. And he said that I asked him questions that nobody's ever asked him before. He was happy about that because they kind of get the same.
I love when you hear that about an interviewer. Like, it's just like so cool when somebody being interviewed says that. So
we got into philosophy, so that was pretty fun. Yeah, the philosophy of what could be out there, right?
Absolutely. I'm taking graduate courses right now in consciousness and transformative studies.
Wow.
And yesterday, or like this week, was the first time they started talking about hyper objects in class. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I know that word. We had Adam on our show when he talked about UFOs as hyper objects. So there's this integration that I get to see in my school now. And they're really open to kind of everything that I talk about, because it's an integrated, philosophy of teaching. Right. And one of my professors actually, I found out, transcribed 100 hours of disclosure documents for Stephen Greer back in the day. So
wow.
And
small world.
Yeah, such a small world. So it's just, the connections are really cool to make.
You need to get him on the show.
I know. I do need to get him on the Dr. Alderman. We did get our other professor on the show, who's a philosopher, and so he was great. Just listening to him talk about Carl Jung and synchronicities and how it all ties in.
Yeah.
So that's fun. I have a lot of fun talking philosophy.
Well, I got it. Is it okay to finish this up with a synchronicity type of situation?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do that.
So
absolutely.
All right. So I was doing the show, and back in late 2013, 2014, I got a message on Facebook, and this person, I think you're the podcaster, the UFO podcaster. And I said, yeah, whatever. So, so she said, well, if your Facebook is right, then we share a birthday. So I go, oh, July 7th, what year? She goes, no, we share a birthday. So I said, oh, wow, okay. And I said, next thing you're going to do is tell me you were born in Boston. She writes back, I was born in Boston. And so we got to talk to each other, a little bit here and there. And I was in not to get too personal, I was in a relationship, but it was not good for too long. And so that was over. But eventually, we got to talk more here and there. We ended up meeting at a conference, and she's very, very nice, very wonderful person. So I really enjoyed talking to her. And then we would talk on the phone a lot. And then, so one day she said, well, what time of the day were you born? And I said, well, in the morning. And she said, well, I was too. And I said, well, I think you can get like a long version of your birth certificate. She said, okay, I'm going to send for mine. You send for yours. So we did. And then I was walking with my sister one day, and we were all born in, my sisters and I were born in the same hospital. And it was only because my mother was a diabetic and we had to go down to Boston. So I said, what, the phone rings, and it was Donna on the phone. She said, what hospital were you born in, by the way? And so I said to my sister, what hospital were you born in? She says the hospital, and she goes, oh my God, we were born in the same hospital. So she sends me her picture of her timestamp on hers. She was born at 8:47 a.m. A couple of days later, my timestamp comes in. I was born at 7:47 a.m., exactly 1 hour to the minute apart. So now we are together. And it's the best relationship of my life. And she's just so wonderful.
All over him. So that's the best.
I'm getting choked up talking about it.
I love it.
That is amazing.
Talk about a synchronicity. And we have tons of synchronicities with our children, mother, and and things happening all the time.
Oh,
so,
wow. I love that.
That is like it. That is fate. That is destiny. That is some sort of higher power guiding you guys together.
Yeah.
You guys are connected on the soul level. I mean, that is just amazing.
Yeah, the total thing. Yeah, it's a total thing. Like, and and we're together now. She's in the other room. We're together now, and it's like every once in a while I'll think about, oh yeah, we were born like an hour apart. Our birthdays are fun.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's such a beautiful story. Congratulations to both of you. I love that. What a way to wrap up the show, and to bring it back to reality and grounded in this earth with beautiful stories like that. I love that. So
yes, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope that we can have you on again someday. Please stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right, it was good seeing you.
All right.
All right, have a great day, guys.